The version 2 PCBs for the Bluetooth adapter have arrived, and as you can see I've had to do some modifications, some quite heavy modifications actually. There's nothing wrong with the sort of Psion digital part here with the Pico and so on. The main problem is the power supply. So I used these ETA 6002 chips, which have a much easier to solder package. Unfortunately, I, for some reason, managed to get the pin out completely wrong. I reversed the pins from 5 to 8 on the footprint, so I've had to swap all those pins over here. Obviously it didn't work when I had the pins wired up incorrectly and blew up a chip, so I've got a stack of chips here that I've blown up. And I've rewired it the other way around, still doesn't really work. And part of the problem is that the data sheet is a bit lacking in any information as to what this chip does really. But as far as I can tell, it sort of only works when there's a battery in there, so you can't really run it off the input voltage, and that battery voltage is then presented as an output. Now there was some sort of mention of it being up around 4 point something volts. That doesn't seem to be true. There is a switching regulator in here, but I think that's just to generate a 4.2 volt charging voltage for the battery. And that means if you're not charging, then you don't have anything other than battery voltage, which can go down pretty low. And I think that's too low really for me to run these regulators here, these AMS 1117s. The Pico powers up, and the I'll get it out and do it. The Pico powers up, the OLED display comes on, because they're all run off the Pico's buck boost regulator, which can actually operate down to 1.8 volts, so that's fine. I can't use the Bluetooth, I can't power the Bluetooth module from that because there's too much current. There isn't enough current capability in the regulator on the Pico to actually power that. It only seems to use around about 200 milliamps when it's operating, but there's mentioned in the data sheet that you need 500, so there must be a startup pulse or something, or maybe when it's transmitting it goes up. So if you go with the 500 milliamps, it doesn't work. If you go with the 200, 190, you might get away with it. So I think at the moment the part of the board here, the power side, needs to be completely rethought. I've got an external prototype board here, which is just basically this circuit taken out of my PCB because all the tracks are wrong, and put on a little, well, it's not a breadboard, but it's an adapter for SO type ICs. And this is operating at the moment. I've never seen it charge, I've never seen that LED come on, but that's probably because my batteries are actually quite highly charged at the moment. So it is running off a battery now, but the Wi-Fi is not working, so I could have a go at wiring that up to the Pico supply and running it off that, or I can just run it off the USB socket I've got here, which works. So code-wise, I did get it working, so I do actually have this transmitting and receiving Bluetooth in terminal mode, but I have problems with interrupts. So if I want to operate this and present the ROM, the comms link ROM, then I need interrupts off. But in order to get the UART working, you need interrupts on. So there's a bit of a conflict there, and I think what I'm going to have to do is run with interrupts off to get the comms link ROM working, and then use the PIO to do the UART link to the Wi-Fi module, because I don't think that uses interrupts. I think that's polled, and that should mean that the whole thing will work. Now I did get the code working once. I managed to load the ROM and it operated and everything was fine, and I did get Bluetooth traffic, but when I tried it again it didn't work. So it seems to be a bit intermittent as to what the interrupts are doing and how they're messing up the interface into the top slot here. I had the same problem with the pack gadget thing that I did, which essentially had a Raspberry Pi on it and presented a ROM. And there I could just turn interrupts off because I wasn't interested in anything that was interrupt driven, but here I am. I've got two UARTs running, one to the Psion and one to the Wi-Fi module. So the conflict in whether interrupts are on or off needs to be sorted out there. But fundamentally it did work, and I was able to transmit and receive Bluetooth, which appeared in the Organiser term menu command. There's still a few problems. Transmit and receive didn't work because it said there was no device, which is a bit odd. So I think it may be detecting some levels on some pins to work out that the comms link hardware is actually plugged into the top slot, but then the term worked, the term command, which does transmit and receive, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. So a few things to sort out and a complete rethink of the power, because that really isn't working very well at the moment. I need to do something there to get this powered properly.